Hello everyone, this is xDragon9, and I wanted to do this quick thought dump on the Dragonhunter Elite Spec because this is the Elite Spec that I've been spending the most time with, as I am primarily a Guardian player, or I usually am in PvE, but I've been kind of trying to experiment a little more toward PvP with it lately, since that's kind of a part of the game I've ignored playing my Guardian in. So I spent a lot of time with it this weekend, and I wanted to kind of get a feel for how maybe the longbow is going to function in PvP, and also to just get a grasp on the Elite Spec in general. So a few things I'm going to get out of the way right now. I've pretty much only been playing the Dragonhunter in PvP, so I have no knowledge of how it's functioning in PvE. I don't know if any of the things I'm going to say relate to PvE in any way, but most of the time I've been spending in PvP with it. The other thing I'm going to get out of the way right now is I personally have not been using the traps very much. They have way too low base damage for the amount of time you have to premeditate and set them up, and outside of a few gimmicky things like using Judge's Intervention and dropping a trap right at someone's feet by teleporting onto them, I don't think they're very good in their current state. So, those things out of the way, what I do want to talk about is the virtues, the longbow, and the traits. So let's just talk about the virtues. If you go into Dragonhunter, your virtues get replaced with Spear of Justice, Wings of Resolve, and Shield of Courage. So, Spear of Justice. This overall is pretty good, I would say, as a replacement for our usual Justice, but it's got one big drawback, and that drawback is that it's a tether, and it's like a projectile. And this doesn't seem like a big deal, but since our old one really only relied on hitting a single attack, and then you would just have like a flat burning over time, and this one relies on a dot in a sense, where you have to latch the spear, and then the spear starts applying its burning like over time, like in increments. That one is kind of a weakening point, and it can be better, as you'll see when we get to the traits, but overall it feels a little bit lackluster in comparison to our usual one, because the usual one is just upfront massive burning damage, and this one, well, isn't. So, traded, it's a lot better than not traded, but we'll get to that when we get to the traits. Wings of Resolve. Oh my gosh, this is freaking amazing. This is probably the best thing about Dragonhunter that I didn't know I wanted or needed to play my class better. This thing is a heal, it's a potential damage dealer, immobilize, Condi cleanse, like you name it, this thing can do it, and I love it for that. It's a giant 600 range leap for us, which we've never had access to, like something kind of like an innate mobility. Like we kind of had that with Greatsword, but this is something that actually feels like it has an impact. Like Greatsword's great because you jump and then you have a blind at the end and some damage, but this is like something that has damage, it has a heal, it has an immobilize, it just has all of these things, and we still get the passive benefit of our virtue of Resolve regularly, which is just fantastic in general. So this is probably the best virtue, in my opinion, of the three new ones, and I love this to death. I want this to stay exactly how it is, unless they want to make it even better somehow, because then I would take that. And last, we have Shield of Courage. So what Shield of Courage does is basically you press it, and you get a wall in front of you, and this wall destroys projectiles. And that's pretty much it. Yeah. So it's pretty cool. It destroys projectiles, so if you're like against rangers or something, it's pretty amazing for that. But overall, I would say it's kind of just a little bit like a long duration Aegis or long duration Shield 5, if you're familiar with Guardian. It's like a bubble, but it's only right in front of you that absorbs / destroys projectiles. So it's pretty good, but I think, I mean, you're gonna pop it when you need it, but it's not like, oh my gosh, gotta pop it, it's the best thing ever. That would be Wings of Resolve, in my opinion. So those are the basics of the virtues. So they changed a little bit. One downside that all of them have, and I think it's a lot more noticeable on Spear of Justice and Shield of Courage than it is on Wings of Resolve, is there's a cast time now. And for some of our traits that we have in the virtues line, which remove condies or grant stability and stun break, having a cast time is actually a pretty big deal because these are things that aren't on our regular virtues if we aren't a Dragon Hunter. So if we really need those condi clears or we really need that stun break, having even that tiny of a cast time can really hurt our class, I think. And I mean, I understand why they have to do it for Wings of Resolve, because Wings of Resolve is like a leap, and we need to have a cast time on that because it's a physical action. And like this is a spear that you throw. Like they all make sense why they have a cast time, but I think it does impact the game a little bit that we have that cast time when it comes to our virtues line, which has things that rely on that instant activation of our virtues. So that is one potential issue I see with the virtues, but overall I am fairly happy with the virtues. Like I said, Wings of Resolve, easily the best virtue that we got with this trait line. I love this to death. So those are my thoughts on the virtues. Next, I'm going to do the traits, and then I'll finish with the longbow, because that one's a little more involved, and I actually have to show some stuff. So, as for traits, this is just a little build I threw together. It's basically like a Celestial Shout Bow Guardian thing. But anyway, this is the one we want to focus on, Dragonhunter. So, the minors, we get basically the first minor gives us access to our new virtues. So, that's just what it does. It gives us our 3 new virtues. Doesn't do anything else other than that. The second minor is Defender's Dogma. Blocking an attack causes Justice to reach its maximum charge. So what this means, if you don't know, is that how our Justice virtue works is that every few attacks, we burn on the third, if traded, or fifth, if not traded, attack. And this minor trait essentially means if you block, that tick automatically goes to the max of whatever it is. So say I needed the damage right now from this, I like really needed to get that little extra burning damage. If I block that number, instead of having to attack 5 times, it's just immediately maxed out. My next attack is going to land a burn. So that's actually a pretty huge deal because we have so many ways to block. Especially our just passive Aegis that we're granted from Shield of Courage or our Courage virtue in general. So basically, as soon as we're entering combat, we're pretty much going to get a burn on you if you don't dodge our first attack, because you're probably going to have attacked us and procced our Aegis, which is a block. So we're going to usually lead with a burn now. The final minor is Pure of Sight. Deal bonus damage to enemies beyond the range threshold, so it's a 10% damage increase for enemies 600 range and further. So this is just basically a flat damage modifier for using your longbow as well, a ranged weapon, or if you're using staff or scepter, it would benefit those two, or really any attack that goes and hits an enemy 600 range away. It's a damage modifier, so there's really not too much to say about it. It's just a nice flat damage modifier. If you're using ranged weapons, you're going to notice it a lot more than if you're using melee weapons, but it's still nice to have. Into the first major section, we have Piercing Light. Trap hits, bleed enemies. I don't really have too much to say about this trait because, as I said, I haven't really been liking the traps, so I assume if you were doing some kind of Condi trap build, this is nice, because Guardians really didn't have any way to apply bleeds before, so having a bleed to layer on top of our burning that we apply in bulk is very nice, because it means maybe they can cleanse the bleed and not cleanse our very damaging burns. So I assume this trait's very nice, but I'm not an expert because I don't use the traps. Next we have Zealot's Aggression. Deal extra damage to crippled enemies. Damage increase 7%. So this is essentially a 7% damage increase to anyone that's crippled. You don't have to apply it. It's any crippled enemy. And we actually do have a few ways to apply crippled, so this does become relevant. There are some traps that apply crippled, and there's also some ways we can get it from other traits, which you'll see in a moment. So It's essentially a 7% damage modifier that we can sort of maintain. So I think this is really strong, but it isn't the option I usually go with. The final option is Soaring Devastation. Wings of Resolve delivers an attack upon landing, which deals some amount of base damage and roots or immobilizes enemies for 1.5 seconds. This is great. This is basically taking something that's generally always been a healing skill, which is our Resolve virtue, and turning it into a damage source. So now, when I use Wings of Resolve, not only am I landing and healing all of my allies, I'm also immobilizing all the enemies in the area of my impact for 1.5 seconds. And in PvP, immobilizes are very powerful. It's not, say, as powerful as a stun or a daze, but immobilizes in general are one of the strongest conditions because they don't allow you to react how you want to. If you don't get rid of that immobilize, even a very short one, like 1.5 seconds, it can really screw you over in a fight. So that is a very, very powerful trait, in my opinion. And I usually take it. Next we have this line, Hunter's Determination. True Shot grants stability for each enemy struck. So, True Shot is our number 2 on longbow. It's a charge shot that pierces. So essentially, every enemy you can hit within 1200 range, you will gain 1 stack of stability that lasts for 3 seconds. I think this is pretty good. I don't know how practical it is, but it's pretty cool. If you want an extra source of stability in addition to the other sources we have of granting stability, I think this is a nice choice. I think it's a little bit of variety. It's a pretty good spot for where it is, like right in the middle here. I don't think it's Grandmaster worthy, but I also don't think it's like first level worthy. It's a solid choice. Next is Bulwark. Shield of Courage is larger and lasts longer. So I'll equip this really quick. So the duration goes up by 2 seconds and the radius increases by 33%. So now, if I press Shield of Courage, you'll see it's a lot larger. So this is all the more extra space that you can block for your allies. I think this makes Shield of Courage a bit better. I think in maybe PvE situations, it would be very powerful if there was a section where you needed reflects, but you didn't necessarily have Wall of Reflect down. You could maybe just like walk with a Guardian in front of you. I mean, that's the dream, right? We have content that actually requires stuff like this, where the Guardian becomes like this mobile bunker that just like everyone gets behind them and the Guardian just walks forward like destroying all the projectiles. That kind of stuff would be awesome. But in PvP, I don't see much use in that. It's pretty cool, but I'm usually not going to take that. And the final one is Dulled Senses. Enemies you knock back are crippled for 4 seconds. So this is multi-purpose. For one, it can give us the cripple we need for that 7% damage modifier back here, or it can also be used just in general with some other interactions we now have access to. So for shield, we have a little bubble that knocks back. For various other skills, we have knockbacks. For longbow, there is a way to gain access to knockback, which we will show in a moment in the Grandmasters, but overall, pretty nice trait. We do have several ways we can knock back as Guardians, so this is pretty nice because it unlocks, again, that damage modifier or just cripple in general is pretty good. It's like a worse immobilize in a sense. But yeah, this is the one I take, mainly because it synergizes with one of the Grandmasters, and so let's get into those Grandmasters. The first one we have is Hunter's Fortification. Apply protection in an area when activating a virtue. 240 radius, 3 seconds of protection, 1 second ICD. This one pretty much sucks. This is really, really, really bad. I do not think I would ever pick this Grandmaster. There's no way that I'm going to waste a Grandmaster slot on 3 seconds of protection for popping any of these, especially because the odds of any of my allies being in 240 radius are very slim, even in a chaotic team fight. This is awful. 3 seconds of protection is nothing. This is like worse than our Shield 4, which is one of the worst skills that Guardians have in general. So I definitely think if there's a point where our trait lines need to be changed, this. And I actually do have an idea for a totally different trait that could replace this, and I'll get into that after I've gone through everything. So the next one we have, which is much better and the one I usually choose, is Heavy Light. Longbow arrows knock back when enemies are within the range threshold, which happens to be 300 range with a 120 knockback on a 7-second ICD. This GM is insane. This is probably the best Grandmaster in my opinion, if you are using a longbow. If you're not using a longbow, obviously, pretty crappy. But if you are using a longbow, I think this should be the Grandmaster you choose in basically every situation. What this means is that no matter if it's an auto attack or any of your other abilities outside of 5, I believe, you have a knockback if your enemy is close to you every single time 7 seconds passes. So that's basically like having an interrupt every 7 seconds if they don't have stability, which is just nuts. It interrupts in all the duels and PvP situations. This just impressed me in every situation. Every time I got initiated on, I just like auto attack the person once, bam, they're knocked down. You know what, if they're knocked down I can do? I can do something like True Shot really quickly at them, or I can do any of my other attacks and follow up on them. This is an incredibly powerful Grandmaster. I would honestly not be surprised if it gets a longer ICD, just because I think it is that crazy. But I really hope it doesn't, because I think Grandmasters should be crazy because they're Grandmasters. They should define a playstyle, and holy cow does this define a playstyle. If someone jumps on you, they're not going to be very happy because they're going to fall on their butt in about a second. And the final option we have in Grandmaster is Big Game Hunter. Striking an enemy tethered by your Spear of Justice causes vulnerability and increases damage dealt. Damage increased 10%, vulnerability for 10 seconds. So, what does this mean? Basically, if you have someone tethered, so if you've hit them with your Spear of Justice, for those 6 seconds, you have a 10% damage modifier on that person, in addition to the burning you're laying on them from the Justice. And every time you hit them, you're also applying vulnerability, which is further increasing your percent damage you're doing to them. This is probably the best trait for Mediguard setups if you were going to go for some sort of meditation guardian. I think even if you're running longbow, this slightly beats out Heavy Light for meditation builds, because those builds are all about getting in, bursting down the opponent as fast as possible, and then getting out. So this, I think, slightly beats that out, assuming you can land your Spear of Justice reliably. And it does have a cast time. It can be dodged, but it's really hard to give up a damage modifier that strong, especially one that applies vulnerability, which is basically an extra damage modifier. It's hard to give that up if you're going for just a pure DPS build. But for the build that I've come up with, which is more bunker heavy and kind of like a shout bow, like I said, Heavy Light is definitely the clear choice for me. So that covers virtues and it covers traits. So the last thing is longbow, and this is where I think the community is very split so far. I've heard some people love the bow, some people hate the bow, so I'm going to try and clear up the things that I find good and bad about the bow. And I'm going to go down here to do it because I do want a bit more room to show off some of the stuff that I'm talking about. So the first thing is the auto attack, Puncture Shot. Fire an arrow that can bounce to enemies behind your target. If an arrow hits a second target, all enemies struck are crippled. So, this is basically auto attack. If it hits an enemy, it splinters behind it and hits another enemy, at least one. And if you hit 2 enemies with it, then it cripples both, which is, again, an activator for our cripple damage modifier if we're taking that, or it's just a nice CC, soft CC to have in general. And it's also a combo finisher, physical projectile, 20% chance, and 1200 range. So it's pretty good. Its damage is acceptable, I think. It's not like the best longbow damage out there, but I don't think Guardians should have the best longbow damage out there. We're not traditional bow users. While maybe we should be somewhat equivalent. I don't think our longbow specifically is geared towards that massive damage spike that rangers can just pump out constantly from like a mile away seemingly. But once I go through the whole kit, I'll get back to this auto attack because I do have one issue with it. Next is True Shot. Charge up energy, creating a powerful attack that pierces through enemies. This is basically a little bit better than double the damage of our auto attack. It pierces, so that means as many targets as line up in 1200 range right in front of you or right behind your target, or right in front of your target, it will hit all of them, which is very good. And it's on a 4-second cooldown, so not too bad. So you charge this up and you fire it, and it goes. So pretty strong. Next is Deflecting Shot. Fire a missile that blinds enemies and destroys projectiles. And also pierces. So this is basically auto attack damage, but it has the added perk of destroying projectiles, which is pretty cool because it's an arrow. So if you shoot this, you see it has that kind of ring around it. In that ring, any projectiles that touch it just get destroyed. Like they never existed. They're absorbed into the arrow and never happened. And if it happens to hit an enemy, that's great. It blinds them too. I think the skill is really cool designed, but one issue with it, which I'll finish the bow and then I'll get back to all the issues with the kit, but I think it's a very cool dynamic. I like that we have the tech now where this projectile can interact with other projectiles that are on the screen. That's really cool to me. Next is the 4, which is Symbol of Energy. Fire a slow, arcing arrow which explodes on impact to burn targets and sear a symbol of energy into the ground that acts as a light field. So, what this does, it does exactly as it says. It's an arcing arrow, a bit slower. It lands, it burns enemies in that, but it also gives vigor. So that's pretty cool because vigor is pretty awesome to have usually. So even if you're bunkering on a point, you can just like drop this down right on the point and then you can just stand in it and keep your vigor uptime, which is really nice. And you can blast it for retaliation as that random guardian just demonstrated, so pretty cool as well. I think this is a pretty cool symbol. The burning's nothing to sneeze at 4 seconds, and because it pulses, that's several burns over the duration of it, so pretty cool. And finally we have Hunter's Ward. I think this is the best skill in the kit, hands down. It has the one issue of a long cast time, but in the build that I play, that's not so much of an issue. So, form your arrows into a barrier and deal damage at the location. And this is a bit hard to show off or visualize without actually seeing it happen, so I'll head over here to these golems to kind of show you what it looks like. So, we cast it, it looks like Barrage, except there's one key difference. When it finishes, oh look, all these golems are now in cages. And these cages essentially act as barriers. So think about Guardian Hammer, Ring of Warding. You can't walk out of it, it keeps knocking you down. That's essentially what this barrier does. So in that giant AoE, there is a chance that 5 targets can be rooted in one of those cages, and unless they have a stability, they're just locked in there. They have to play around in that little tiny space, or else they'll keep getting knocked down if they try to get out of it. I think this is the best kit skill for the longbow, hands down. It has the longest cooldown, it has the longest cast time, but as a skill 5 that is supposed to have this large impact, I think this does a very good job. It feels like a skill 5 should to me. Very, very powerful. I really like this skill. So, overall, I think the bow, fantastic. But here are the issues I have with the bow. The first one is our auto attack. While yes, it's very nice, it deals a pretty good amount of damage, and just so we're clear, I'm running Celestial, so if you see low numbers, this isn't an indication of bow damage, that's just I'm low DPS because I'm in Celestial. But I have an issue with it, and that's the 3/4 second cast time. What's my issue with that? Well, if you look at our True Shot, oh look, it also has a 3/4 second cast time. And you know what really bothers me about that? This says charge up energy. And you know what? I can understand that. You charge up energy, and then you shoot it. Well, you know what isn't charging? My auto attack. My auto attack isn't charging energy. This is just a regular old auto attack. And I don't think something that charges should have the same duration as my auto attack for a cast. So I don't know if you fix that by speeding up the auto animation, speeding up the cast time. Maybe if the auto attack flew faster, it would be better. Or maybe maybe True Shot needs to be more damaging or have a longer cast time so it truly feels like a charge shot. Like, even if you increase the casting time on True Shot, but gave it a little more damage, I'm perfectly okay with that, because it would feel like you're actually charging something. It doesn't feel like you're just using a better version of your auto attack every 4 seconds, because that's essentially what this is. This is a better version of our auto attack that does over double the damage every 4 seconds. So why would you not use this ability every single time it's off cooldown? Because it is strictly better than our auto attack in every situation, basically. I do not know why a charge has the same... Yeah, that just bothers me. Those two need to be tweaked somehow in that respect. The next issue is on Deflecting Shot, and it also carries over to Symbol of Energy. And that is, these for some reason, and this is probably a bug, this may have already been fixed by ArenaNet internally on their clients, or maybe this is the new thing they're doing going forward, but these can only be fired forwards. And what do I mean by forwards? Well, as you see, there's this indicator. And usually, if you shoot it behind you, your character will just turn around and shoot it. Well, with these skills, that doesn't happen. When you use these skills behind you, you get a no line of sight error. And that's actually a pretty huge deal, because if you're trying to maneuver around in combat, and oh no, the thief just rolled behind you, oh, well... Oh, here, let me just turn around. Okay, now I can shoot. That's a pretty big deal. Even with an about face, that's awkward. That's an extra key press that I would have to do instead of just having my character be intelligent enough to just turn around like it always has. I don't know why that is like that. And like I said, it carries over to Symbol of Energy. And Symbol of Energy actually does a better job because if you notice with the Deflecting Shot, it's still green the whole time. Like, it looks like I should be able to cast behind me. It's green indicator. Well, this isn't. Symbol of Energy is telling me, no, you can't do that. That's a no. You can't put this behind you. You can only put this in front of you, not behind you. So, if it was like that, okay, that's fine with me. It's telling me very clearly, you cannot put this behind you. But because every other skill in the game has been set up and put in my mind where I can cast these behind me, I don't want to have to think that extra step just because I'm using a new weapon. So, like I said, that's probably a bug or something that's already been fixed, or if that's the new direction, it obviously needs to be standardized across all classes now, because it hurts a lot in very tight situations when I can't cast these things behind me. And then the last issue I have is also with Symbol of Energy. And that is the idea of just, it fails to cast. And this is probably, again, another bug, but this video is kind of multi-purpose. It's to show these bugs, but also give my generic thoughts. So, if you take, like, say, Warrior F1 on their longbow, you start casting, and then as you are walking forward, you can cast it, and the fire field just drops. Well, what happens with Symbol of Energy is a bit different. If you cast it and then walk past it, where is it? It's gone. It's on full cooldown, the symbol didn't go down, and now I'm out of 15-second cooldown for something that I probably really needed to do in a fight. So, probably a bug, like I said, but that's a pretty huge deal. Like, if I'm trying to maneuver, it's like, oh man, I'm gonna get it, and then I just get a no line of sight, or it just cancels itself and doesn't go down. Those things hurt in PvP a lot, so I noticed them right away when I was trying to use the longbow in fighting situations. So, overall, longbow, a lot better than people are giving it credit for, I think. I think it's a fantastic weapon. Surprisingly, very powerful in bunkering. and I think that's mainly due to how Heavy Light functions, and which is why I think Heavy Light may even be nerfed, because it seems almost too powerful. But I think Longbow, as a weapon, does feel more bunkery with Heavy Light. It feels, well, heavy. It feels like that weapon that has a large impact and can kind of just anchor a point. And I really like that about it, because traditional bunkering, you have your mace, you have your focus, maybe you have a shield if you're that kind of person that doesn't like focus, but overall, you're pretty much just, you have that set, and then your other weapon was always kind of a toss-up and felt kind of awkward no matter what you picked, because it just didn't really feel right. Bow fills that really nicely, actually. It has the knockback you need, it has the lockdown you need, with Hunter's Ward if you can land it, especially... Okay, here's the best thing about doing this in a bunker setup. You have access to Feel My Wrath, which you can take outside of bunkering, but I'm using bunkering as my example. So this 2 3/4, if I cast Feel My Wrath, well, suddenly everything's a lot faster, and that Hunter's Ward comes out like that. It's just there. 5 targets immediately locked down if they don't dodge. And that's crazy good. So I think Bow has a lot of potential as a bunker weapon. And also, one more thing I just remembered. Deflecting Shot. This skill is weird to me because I kind of get where they're going with it. Like, it's a very cool skill. It destroys projectiles on the way. But the more I thought about it, why isn't this a targeted ability? Because most situations I can think of, I would probably choose a targeted ability. I'm going to be shooting at the person who's firing projectiles, and I'm not going to be like randomly off to the side shooting people, trying to make esports plays like, oh, there's a ranger arrow shooting toward my teammate, I need to shoot this in the complete off to the side direction, and it's going to absorb the arrow as it flies past, and they're going to collide in the air, and it's going to be huge esports plays. Like, maybe that'll happen, but it's probably not going to happen. The most likely situation is I'm going to be charging at that ranger, or he's going to be running at me, and I'm going to want this to just fly right at him because his arrows are coming right at me, and that's where I want mine to go. I shouldn't have to, in my opinion, aim this at them. And I'm not saying that because I'm lazy, I don't want to aim it. I'm saying because logically that makes the most sense to me. It makes sense to me to shoot an arrow that is targeted at the person who's shooting at me, more so than it is, oh man, I have to aim, and if I miss a little bit, well then I just die. That doesn't feel very rewarding to me as a projectile defense mechanism. Maybe that's what they were going for. They wanted a bit more active projectile defense, that you actually did have to aim, and if that's the case, then great. Let's see more of that kind of stuff. Let's put more active stuff like that. But in terms of just general use and how it compares to things in the game already, it feels kind of weird to use this when I could just, drop a wall of Reflect or something. You know what I'm saying? It's kind of weird like that. But overall, Bow very good, Virtue's very good, traits overall pretty good. But I want to end on one concept idea that I was thinking about, because obviously I'm not too big a fan of this Hunter's Fortification. I think this trait is not Grandmaster worthy, and I think it's not even like in the game worthy. I think it's that bad. But, if it has to be there, I guess I'll just not pick it. But here's one idea that I had. Right now we have this issue where True Shot and Puncture Shot have the same cast time. Well, how do we fix that? Well, Rangers have this thing called Lead the Wind, which increases their attack speed with Bow. And while I don't think that's really the way to go for Dragonhunter, because the whole idea of Dragonhunter, I believe, is to have that really impactful, strong auto attack, just like you feel the force of every single arrow you're shooting. Well, how about we just modify the Puncture Shot auto attack to something more interesting? You have this really cool skill that has this bounce behind it, and if it hits both, cool, you get rewarded, both are crippled. What if it was something better? What if it was like old school Guild Wars 1? Anyone who played Guild Wars 1 will probably understand where I'm coming from with this idea. So, in Guild Wars 1, there was this whole concept of a party composition called Splinter Barrage, and it was a build that Ranger Ritualists could run, where they would cast Splinter Weapon on themselves, which shattered your auto attacks in an AoE around your target. And then you would also use the skill Barrage, which at the time was a lot different. It wasn't a rain of arrows, it was more like you shoot a volley of arrows in front of you and it hits all targets around your primary target. And so when you combine that with Splinter Shot, you get explosive AoE damage. And if the whole goal of Dragonhunter is to feel the impact of every shot, why not have some really cool way to increase the just power you feel behind each auto attack? What if instead of just one bounce behind the target, what if when that arrow hit, it splintered to all foes within like 180 degrees behind the target, and was like a real splinter arrow? Like, you shot that arrow so hard into that target, it splintered out behind them and crippled everyone behind them within like a reasonable distance. Like, however much this bounces now, that's probably too much. But even if I had to trade a longer bounce like length in for just like a more thing, like if I could shoot this first golem and then I just saw like this wave of just like heavenly light just splinter out and cripple all these golems, that would be amazing to me. That would feel like it would give me Guild Wars 1 nostalgia, because it's like this throwback to this really cool playstyle that players had developed based around these two skills and how they interacted. But it's also just, it gives me that sense of power in my auto attack that I don't think every class necessarily has at the moment. But Dragonhunter seems to be that one, and maybe Reaper too. Just like those classes that you want to feel the power in every swing of that auto. And right now, this kind of doesn't feel like that. You're kind of just like, it's kind of cool. It bounces. But, I mean, if you look at True Shot, that looks like it hurts a lot more, honestly. It's got this whole, like, light aura around it. And, I don't know. I think if the whole goal is this whole concept of power, I don't think it's so crazy to think you modify the auto attack into this whole splinter off idea. Because clearly they want to make this point of having this bounce or this crippled thing and reward good play. So why not just enhance that if we as players choose to take that? Like, maybe that is our goal as players. Maybe our goal is to shoot arrows from the back line and have them like cripple a Zerg or something in World vs. World. Or if you're on a point, you like are in the back and you're just like shooting an arrow, and then just like everyone on the point kind of gets a little bit crippled for like it's a short duration, 2 seconds. And then it's all of a sudden your team maybe gets the upper hand because the enemy team kind of just lost their mobility because they clumped up too much. I think that's a cool, impactful thing you could have on an auto attack that isn't totally crazy, but it is kind of like a Grandmaster trait. It's the kind of thing that would define a build, but not necessarily be the only option, because you have things like Heavy Light, which are very strong already, and you have the Tether on Spear applying vulnerability and a damage modifier. So you really don't have anything else that fits. Like, Protection on Virtue is just kind of awkward. It's not very good. Like, 3 seconds of protection is, even if you spam all 3 of these, it's nothing. It's not gonna last, and it'll probably just get boon stripped or fall off, or your ally will apply protection over themselves anyway. I just think it needs to be changed to something else, and that's my one idea of what it could be. I think it's a cool idea, but I'm just one person. I'm not ArenaNet. I don't know. But that is my thoughts, guys. This has been a little bit longer than probably I expected it to be, but that is my overall opinion of Dragonhunter. On the whole, class, very, very good. I think it's a lot better than people are giving it credit for. Do I think it's the best elite spec of this weekend that we've seen? Probably not. That probably goes to Chronomancer or Reaper. But in terms of just my main class, and my main class being extended to do something that it couldn't before, it feels perfect. This is very, very good to me. Outside of the few minor bugs or issues I have, I love this. I will most definitely be running this in PvP, and if the content requires it, I could totally see myself running this in PvE as well. This is a super fun thing. I like the weapon. I like what they do with the virtues. It's a lot of fun. And I think if you guys haven't yet, you should definitely give it a try, because it's that good. I really think you will have a lot of fun. And I think you should try it how I do. Try it in a bunker build. Try it with shouts, or try it in a unique way. Don't just do the immediate thing, which is do the damage, as much as damage as possible, because that's the only thing that matters. Try it in a different way. Try it with heavy light, and try it with bunkering. See what you guys think. I think it's a lot better when people experiment with things. So, that's all for me, guys. Thank you all for watching. If you have any thoughts on or feedback on the video, feel free to leave it. And I will probably be playing more Dragonhunter, or if you have any questions, feel free to add me in game. If you want to add this character, it's Dragonhunter, which is just a funny name I came up with on the spot for this beta character. So, or if you want to just add my account, it's right there. So if you want to leave me a comment or talk to me about Dragonhunter, feel free. But other than that, that's all for me, and I will talk to you guys in the next video.